friends. I'm gonna make recycled paper today and I'm gonna bring you along with me. Enjoy!
Alright, day 1. We're gonna decide what color of pulp we want. I'm gonna go with the purple. Whatever color you choose is going to dry down a little bit, so keep that in mind when you're mixing the color. Here is a little bit of an ASMR where I rip the paper up. I chose to use a darker purple and a half sheet of lighter purple. You can use gouache. I recommend that you try out both and see what your preference is. Next, we're going to add the paper you would like to recycle. These are my notes from college. Thank you to all the teachers who assigned a million readings that I'm probably never going to read again. These specifically are my notes for theology. Thank you to you know who. Next, you're going to add some warm water if you want to leave it overnight. If you have less time, you can use hot water. Just be very careful. If you use hot water, I recommend letting it set for a few hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours before you blend it, just to allow for the water to be absorbed into the paper. If you do what I did, which is use warm water, then leave it set overnight. I also recommend to give it a little toss around in the water, just so that way it absorbs more into the paper and not just the outside layers. It really is helpful. And then go ahead and cover it and let it set.
So as you can see, there's a little bit of prep involved. I'm gonna let it set for overnight, and then tomorrow we'll blend it and do the next step.
Day 2, the reshaping of the paper.
Hey friends, so it's day 2. I'm going to make the paper now, and I hope you enjoy. Next step.
Alright, so now that it's sat and it's absorbed as much water as you think it should, now we're going to blend it. I went ahead and used my immersion blender that I found on Amazon, and the trick here is you blend it to the consistency that you would like. I recommend leaving some little bits of paper that's not blended just because it adds interest when you're actually making the paper. You can blend it completely, make sure that there's no lumps or bumps if you want as well. If you want smoother paper, it's all up to you and your preference though. Alrighty, so now that that's mixed and blended to my liking, I'm going to add glitter. You can add whatever you would like, or you can just leave it as plain. I personally think that glitter adds interest, and I love glitter. This is biodegradable glitter that I found on Amazon. I also am going to use some punched up index cards as confetti. I think that it really suits this paper. And I also will be adding some colored thread. I'm going to use 4 different colored threads: purple, gray, red, and white. And here's a quick time lapse of me cutting those up just for fun. You can add different lengths. You don't have to add it at all if you don't like it. I personally think that it adds more interest. I like colorful, whimsical paper. Now that that's mixed, we're going to go ahead and put down our saran wrap and paper towel. This will be used in a second. And we're going to use a sink for my process, just because there's not a container big enough for my screen. But I'm going to fill it up most of the way. I'm not going to cover it completely with water. There's different processes on how to make paper. This is how I do it. Today I'm going to be using some flower petals that I pressed in a book that I really liked the color of, that I thought would complement this paper. I recommend putting a little bit extra layer of pulp right on top of where the petals were that you were wanting them, so they won't move around as much. You don't have to do this. Next, you're going to want to move the pulp around a little bit with your fingers, put them where you want them. The trick is you want to have a thin enough paper where it actually resembles paper rather than thick, because if it's too thick it won't dry nicely and it will resemble the carton for eggs that you buy at the store. This isn't wrong, it's just you have to find where you prefer in the middle of too thick and too thin. If it is too thin, then it will rip. And then you go ahead and let the water soak out a little bit. Again, you can wiggle around a little bit of the pulp with your fingers to make sure it gets into the corners. And then we're going to set it aside to dry. Here's a little bit of a close-up of what it will look like. You let it dry for 1 hour. This is a quick time lapse of me squeezing the water out with a sponge. This is a very important step. Next, we're going to turn the paper out onto a flat surface. I use saran wrap so I don't ruin the table beneath. And I'm going to run my fingers along the edges to make sure that there's no paper that got in between the frame and the screen. And it will take some practice in getting used to on how to unframe it without ruining it. Sometimes it might crinkle. You just have to be very gentle because the paper is still wet and fragile. And here is a quick shot of what it looks like before it dries. And it will look different tomorrow.
So now we'll let it set for 24 hours-ish. It should be mostly dry by then, and then if it's not, then we will iron the paper. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay?
Day 3, the finished product.
Hey guys, so it's the morning of day 3. The paper is mostly dry. Some of them we are going to need to iron, so I'll show you that.
Alright, so since last night there were some that were a little bit thicker, so they're a little bit damp still. So I'm going to need to iron them. 1.5 sheets of paper that I did were already dry because they were very thin. As you can see, the color did fade overnight. It's a little bit bleached out, but it still looks great. And this one, it is very thin. I'm just going to show you a second of how thin it is. So for the papers that will be needing ironed, I recommend using an iron and an ironing board. Be very careful. Do not use the heat for very long on any given spot. I only put it there for 1 or 2 seconds and I pick it up each time. I don't want to drag it across the paper to ruin it. Take your time, do both sides, and you'll be good as golden. That's how you make paper.
And there you have it. It's easy as that. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching.
If you're interested in this video, then please let me know. I am hoping to make more videos of me making recycled paper.